everybody. Thank you for coming back. My name is Emilia, for those of us who just found me. The Beautiful Mind Academy is a tutoring center. We do one-to-one and group sessions. To learn more, you can always visit our website. And for our YouTube, we are going through our BCBA 5th edition task list. So we can finally say we finished section B. And today we're going to actually be going into task list C, which is all about measurement, data, data display, and interpretation. Section 1 is establish operational definitions. So that's what we're going to be learning about today. So keep on listening. Let's answer some questions, write in those comments, and let's figure this out together. So the first thing is, what are operational definitions? So when we look at what we do in our field, right? Everything that we do, we must define basically everything. And it has to be in operational terms, which means that everything that we write is precise and consistent measurement of behavior. An operational definition involves behavior that is very clear, concrete, and observable so that it can be measured and replicated objectively. In other words, operational definitions provide specific guidelines on how to identify and measure a particular behavior. These definitions often include details about the observable and measurable aspects, such as its frequency, duration, intensity, or the specific actions involved. How I like to remember this is, as long as we can take this program, for example, or this behavior, right, and I can give it to 5 people and they are looking at the exact same behavior and measuring that behavior in the ways that I planned for them to measure it, that's when we know that an operational definition is effective, okay? So anytime that we want to define anything, we want it clear enough that everybody's doing the exact same thing, okay? So as long as these behaviors are observable and measurable, we can then define them. So let's go ahead and see why we do this, okay? So why do we even bother with operationalizing definitions? Okay, the first thing is precision and clarity, okay? Operational definitions provide very clear and specific guidelines for identifying and measuring behavior. This precision ensures that there is a shared understanding among observers and what constitutes a particular behavior. This clarity is crucial for maintaining consistency and objectivity in behavioral assessments and interventions. So when we are defining things very clearly, this doesn't just mean, behavior. This also means that when we write behavior plans or behavior reduction plans or anything else, that our writing is always very clear. Our writing is always very measurable and observable in terms, like I said before, that anybody can pick it up and understand it. Anybody can pick it up, walk into a room and say, this is the behavior that we're looking for. Especially, when we are dealing with a lot of children in one space and a lot of different behaviors happening in one space, we want to make sure that it's the one that we are measuring and observing, right? So why else is it important? Consistency in measurements. So when we operationally define, it enables consistent measurement across different settings and across different individuals. So when multiple people are involved in data collection, having a well-defined operational definition helps ensure that everyone is measuring the same behavior. And in turn, if measurement systems are the same and consistent, that means that our data is reliable. That means that we can look at our data and determine if something is effective or not effective and know, okay, well, this data is very reliable because even when I went in and let's say did IOE data collection, we all looked at the same thing. Our data was also the same. Later on, we will be discussing what IOA is. So continue watching these videos and we'll get there eventually. Okay. Number 3 is being repeated. So providing clear criteria for identifying, measuring behaviors, it will facilitate the replication of our interventions or whatever we plan to do with our learner. So behavior analysts should be able to replicate this study or intervention based on the definitions that we write up. Okay, so when we look, and not only are we talking about clinic-based, but we can also think about research. When we think about research and when it's generalized, we want to make sure that what we are doing, our interventions, have been generalized appropriately to actually say that it has indeed been generalized. Because if we're running 3 different programs if we're running one program but in 3 different ways, we can't say for certain which one was effective. We need to make sure that we're running things the way that it is written out. Okay, so understanding these things here will allow us to understand why it's so important to operationalize our definitions, and how important it is in turn, right, also reflects how well our programs are doing. And if our programs are well written and well executed by our instructor therapists, then we have a child who is doing a lot of learning. Then we have a child who we can look at their graphs, visually inspect, and if something isn't going as planned, that's okay. We can then step in and do something different based off of the accurate data that we have. So it is very important because all of these moving pieces all go towards letting our learners learn, right? And so it all starts with being able to operationalize all of the things that we do, okay? So I want you guys to see the importance of this and not rush through these thinking, well, they're going to understand. Whoever reads this, they have to understand because they've been in the field for so long. Don't always think that way, right? We can all make mistakes, so just make sure that we go back, double, even triple check, and make sure that our protocols, interventions, or whatever documentation we are writing is clear and concise, and we are looking at behavior that are measurable and observable. Okay, so let's go ahead and see here. What makes up our operational definitions? Topographical. Okay, this means that we describe what the behavior looks like in clear and observable terms. It specifies the physical action or responses that make up the behavior. We want it to be as specific as possible because we want to ensure that therapists are all observing and measuring the correct behavior. So sometimes we will sit there and we will describe what kicking looks like, for example, right? And sometimes we have like, oh, well, we know what kicking is. Yes, right? We do know what kicking is, but let's not assume that kicking looks the same for everybody. It might look a little bit different. So we want to make sure that we're defining it. We also want to make sure that we have examples and non-examples in our definitions, okay? So these examples and non-examples will really and be clearly set out. So if something happens, for example, if we're defining kicking, right? An example would be a non-example if they're playing soccer, right? Or if they're pretending or playing charades and they were supposed to do these things, right? So this way we're not seeing kicking frequency so high for things that he was, or this learner was supposed to be doing, right? Which is the importance of example and non-examples, okay? And again, as a reminder, we're ensuring that the behavior is observable and measurable. Okay, so like some examples. So if we were looking at, I don't know what this is. Sorry about that. If we're looking at physical aggression, okay? Physical aggression, like I said before, can look different for everybody. But for this, I'm going to say any instance the learner makes physical contact with any person's body using his body or an object with enough force to cause an audible sound and or leave visible mark on the skin. This includes hitting, kicking, hitting with an object, pushing, pulling, pinching, or punching. This does not include giving a high five, squeezes, hugs, or any common social physical interaction. So I'm hoping that this is going to be clear enough for an IT going into, let's say, a classroom, and when these things happen, so when hitting, kicking, hitting with an object, pushing happens, they're collecting whatever kind of data they need to, excluding high fives. So for example, if I did not write, this does not include giving a high five, squeezes, then we're leaving that up for interpretation. Then we're leaving that for the IT to make that call and say, does that include physical aggression? Does it not include? And we don't want that, because then we have inconsistencies. Then we have the potential for one IT to be including it, another IT not to, and then our data is skewed, and that's not what we want. Okay, so this is an example of physical aggression that has the topographical definition. It has our examples and our non-examples as well. All right, so now the question is this a good definition? Yes or no? Happiness is operationally defined as the presence of observable behaviors, including smiling, laughter, positive verbal expression, and engaging in activities with enthusiasm. So go ahead and tell me, is this a good definition? Yes or no? And I also want you to explain. If something is missing, let me know. If it's simply not a good definition for other reasons, let me know as well. And you can comment what your thoughts are down below. So let's go ahead and explain this. So is this a good definition entirely? No, it's not. There are components to this definition that are missing, and we're also looking at something that we wouldn't classify as behavior. We would never say, go and look and see if this person is showing these things. So happiness, we would never use. We want to make sure that we are defining behaviors that are observable and measurable, and we stay away from state of beings. We don't want to look at anything like happiness or anxious or sad, because again, these things can look different for everybody, right? Just because this person is smiling or laughing, it doesn't mean that they're entirely happy, okay? So that's one. Two, it doesn't provide our examples. It also doesn't provide our non-examples. And within that definition, we're also saying things like positive verbal expression. Well, what does that mean? Right? We also say engaging in activities with enthusiasm. We should stay away from things like that, okay? Because we cannot measure that. And even if we can, it's going to look different for everybody. Again, we're coming right back to that point and really addressing that it's not going to look the same for everybody, which is why we have to make sure that our definitions are very, very clear. Okay, so to answer this in short, it is not a clear definition. It's not a good one. Okay, happiness is not a behavior. We cannot measure feeling. Is this a good definition? Yes or no? Kicking, using the foot, feet, or legs to make contact with another person to get their attention. What do you guys think? Would you say that this definition is a good definition? Okay. So if you said yes, let me know why. I would like to know where your thoughts are. And if you said no, I would also like to know why you said no. For me, I'm going to say it is not a good definition. One, yes, we are looking at a behavior, right? Kicking is a really great behavior. So that's good. But when we start to say using the foot, feet, or legs to make contact with another person to get their attention. To get their attention is the function. And in our operational definitions, we do not use the function of behavior. Okay? So stay away from that. And this example also lacks examples and non-examples. Okay? So it's actually not a full definition. Okay? We do not mention function, and kicking can be described in greater detail by adding examples and non-examples. Let alone, we can also describe kicking a lot better, especially if this learner, let's say, always uses the right foot or both, right? You can be very, very, very concise, right, on what that looks like for each person. And then I ask, fix this definition, okay? So then we can fix it by saying, any instance of the learner extending their leg and making physical contact with another person's body. An example, the teacher tells the learner work is done. This does not include when the learner is in the gym playing soccer or with a ball. Okay, and again, we can also take this definition and expand it and make it better, right? But this is just a way to see how we can start expanding and using all components of our operational definition. Okay, some of this has been cut out. So crying, is this a good definition? Crying, any instance the learner produces a vocalization accompanied by any facial contractions with and or without tears for longer than 2 seconds. For example, when a task is too difficult, when a peer is playing with an item the learner wants to play with, when denied access to a reinforcer, when the learner does not want to complete a task, or if a peer is saying something the learner does not like. This does not include instances where the learner is hurt and as a result begins to cry, or laughing so hard that the eyes tear up. Okay? So is this a good definition? We are getting there. We're definitely getting there with much, much better. So I would say, for the most part, this is a very good definition. Okay? I would be able to know what crying looks like. Everybody would be measuring crying similarly because it has to be longer than 2 seconds and it has to produce a vocalization. Something that I wouldn't add in this definition would be denied access to a reinforcer. I would make sure that we're not using, I would include these things in all of the definitions as well, like about 3 to 4 definitions. And I do like the non-examples that this person also used to indicate when it's not applicable. So even if this person is crying in these certain situations, it wouldn't count. Okay? So I would say that this definition is good. So if you're up for it, now it's your turn. I would like you guys to operationally define screaming, flopping, and SIB. You can do an operational definition for one, you can do it for all of them, or you can just find new behaviors that you would like. Feel free to operationally define these in the comments. So this way we can start to see that operational definitions are not going to be the same. And the way that every person writes them is going to be different, and that's okay. Right? As long as we have the most important components in our definitions, then we can all be correct about it. Okay? Well, thank you everybody for watching. This is the last slide in our PowerPoint. So feel free to let me know if you do need extra assistance with any of these items on the task list. And if you are really strong in operational definitions, please provide some examples in the comments. It would be really nice to start seeing our community grow on this YouTube page. Thank you everybody once again, and I hope to see you in our next video. Thank you.